Hello and welcome back to the Winning Agenda. My name is Jesse Muleman Marshall. That's right. I've picked up a brand new name since getting married late last year. So many thanks to my lovely wife for sharing her surname with me. But I'm here to talk about two very exciting topics today. One is Everfest, the brand new set that is launching all around the world within the next sort of 24 hours. We've already got lots of people cracking packs open and talking about the cards that they're enjoying most. And I'm here to talk about the 10 most exciting cards for me. Obviously, there are lots of different cards in the set, and people are really excited about lots of different things. But I'm going to have a quick chat about the 10 cards that I'm really excited about slotting into decks, building around, and even coming across on the other side of the table. I also just wanted to, before I get into that, very quickly reflect on what was an incredible Australian Nationals tournament last weekend. So many thanks to Legend Story Studios for putting on the event, and also to my fellow Australian Nationals players for playing in a really amazing spirit. I mean, for those of you who followed the Winning Agenda for a long time, you will know that I've been to 3 Netrunner World Championships, many Netrunner National Championships, Store Championships, Regional Championships, and, you know, Netrunner has an amazing community and has always had an amazing community. But one of the things that I found difficult about some trading card communities, particularly Magic, has been, from time to time you do get people playing not necessarily in the right spirit, sharking, being a little bit grumpy about losing, salty, that sort of thing. But what I found really incredible about Flesh and Blood Nationals this year was that universally my experience with my opponents was that people were positive, they were respectful, there was no negativity, and there was no anger in terms of people who won or lost. And there was a lot, and this is something I see a lot in Flesh and Blood actually, and partly because I think of the nature of the game, and I've spoken about this, that there's less of a random element. There's no mana screw compared to Magic. And so there's fewer feel-bad games where you just feel like you didn't even get to play. And there's often a sense when you lose a game, and myself included, that you could have done something better. You could have played differently, which I think leads to fewer people being frustrated with the game itself when they lose. But anyway, whatever the reason, it was a fantastic tournament. I was really excited to make day 2. That was one of my objectives. Of course, I would have loved to make top 8. I won all 3 rounds on day 2 in my draft pod, but unfortunately just missed out on top 8 on tiebreakers. There were people on the same wins as me all the way up to 5th, but I ended up 11th because unfortunately I took some losses earlier in the tournament. So anyway, all of that aside, thanks to LSS, thanks to all my Melbourne teammates and people who tested with me, Toby, Lee, Isaac, Luke, Laura, Harry, Daniel, thanks to all of you who sort of traveled with me, and thanks to all of the people from all around Australia who we played some wonderful games with and got to know both within the tournament and after hours as well. It's one of the great things about Nationals. So Nationals aside, let's move on to Everfest, the main topic here today. And the coming in at number 10 on our top 10 list is Teklo Pounder. So this is a mechanologist item, and what I like about this, there's a lot of this in Everfest, and that is cards that are essentially part of like large cycles with cards in Crucible of War. And Teklo Pounder, which is such a funny name. Like saying Teklo Pounder sounds funny, but it's also really similar to Teklo Foundry Heart, Found Pound. Anyway, Teklo Pounder is much like Plasma Purifier in the sense that rather than buffing your weapon attacks, you're instead buffing your boost attacks and making them stronger. Obviously, it's a bit more limited than Plasma Purifier because it's only got 3 steam counters, whereas Plasma Purifier can give you that sort of long game control element where you're grinding your opponent out and making your pistol stronger. Teklo Pounder instead gives you a boost, but it is for 3 turns. And what it says is it's a 2-cost item. It enters the arena with 3 steam counters on it, and when it has no steam counters on it, destroy it. Once per turn, whenever you boost an attack action card, remove a steam counter from Teklo Pounder. If you do, the attack gains 2. So, plus 2 strength. So a couple of important things. It's not optional. So whenever you boost an attack action card, you need to remove a steam counter if there is one on it. And if you do, the attack gains plus 2 strength. Once it runs out of steam counters, it gets destroyed. And the effect that buffs can only trigger once per turn. So it'll trigger on the first boost that you perform. This is much like Teklo Core, much like Plasma Purifier, a way for you to, and like all the other items really, develop some kind of benefit in future turns from an investment you're making now. Like the other items, it doesn't have go again, so you can, obviously combine it at the end of a boost chain. You can throw this down, or if you've only got a couple of cards left in hand because you've been doing some blocking, then this might be your only play for the turn. But like Teklo Core, it gives this sort of sense that in the next couple of turns, you can have some really massive turns. So you can even combine this with something like a Teklo Core. It is a little bit hard because of the go again element. But if you are able to net an action point, perhaps during a high octane turn, and you can put out a Teklo Pounder and a Teklo Core, then you can then continue to keep up your momentum that you've had following on from your high octane turn with free resources and free additional strength next turn, and hopefully your opponent will have had to block out quite a bit on your high octane turn as well. But in any event, Teklo Pounder I think gives the boost archetype of dash as opposed to the archetypes that are more heavily geared towards using the pistol as the win condition. It gives the boost archetypes just that little bit of extra strength, that little bit of extra capability to push through damage on the big turns, which means that you can set up your pitch stack to have some more dominate attacks, and we've got a great new dominate boost attack in this set. Teklo Pounder obviously synergizes really well with that, but it synergizes really well with any of the on-hit effects in the existing card pool of boost attacks, and just lets you get in some more damage on those key turns when you're trying to go big and when you really want to put the pressure on, and hopefully steal the momentum and then run with it from there. So I really like this one, and I'm interested to see what it does for Mechanologist builds, and whether we do see a bit more of a resurgence of boost aggro dash because of this. Number 9 is one that probably isn't going to be on many people's top 10 lists, but I'm really interested in this card, and it's High Striker, from the perspective of being a potential replacement for Plunder Run. It's not as strong as Plunder Run. It has a few more restrictions, and it requires you to combo it with Cash In order to get the card advantage. But over the course of the game, it can, I think, deliver somewhat of a similar benefit. So the yellow version is the one that I think I'm probably most interested in. The red version is obviously good as well if you're playing more of a red line deck, whether it's in Briar or somewhere else. But the yellow gives you the cash in benefit because it gives you 4 copper tokens, which you can then use to play cash in for free, netting you back 2 cards later. Or netting you 1 card, but cash in drawing 2. So High Striker is a 0 cost action. It has go again, and it says the next time an attack you control hits this turn, create 4 copper tokens, and it blocks for 2. So it's not the most powerful card in the set, but I think it in a format we're moving into where we don't have Plunder Run, where this is a generic that gives any hero the ability to have an on-hit effect that gives them +2 cards, albeit on a future turn, and albeit only when they draw the cash in. I think that's something worth thinking about when you're building decks. When you're building decks, particularly something like Briar that gives you the reward for non-attack actions, or something like even Chain and other Rune Blades, which do get those rewards from their other cards for having played non-attack actions. Or given that both Cash In and High Striker are yellows, in something like Prism, if you do have more of an aggressive Illusionist build that's just looking for a couple more on-hit effects, and a little bit more card advantage. Admittedly, Prism does have other ways to get card advantage through Tome of Divinity, etc. But if this is what you're after, more on-hit effects to work with the new Illusionist attacks that are more powerful but don't go into soul when they hit, perhaps a more High Striker, Cash In, and then some of the sort of generic Illusionist attacks in this set, maybe a build that goes well with Luminaris and some of the new auras. So I guess this is just giving any faction the opportunity to replace Plunder Run and its card advantage engine with something that is a little bit slower, but does still have that inevitability, I guess. If you can hit, you've got these 4 copper tokens sitting there, and at some point in the game, whenever you draw your cash in, you can turn that into 2 cards, which is pretty cool. Coming in at number 8 is Scour. And this is a really, really interesting card because I mean, LSS, teased us with all those tweets before the set was released about how, there was going to be one card that does this and one card that does that. And a lot of them were new effects that we hadn't really seen before in the game. And a card that destroys auras, we do actually get a couple of them in this set. But this one destroying aura tokens and auras with cost 0 and destroying multiple of them at once leads to some really interesting counterplay, particularly against Runeblade. And I think what we're seeing in this set, and one of the things that LSS has really interestingly explored in the designer space in this set, is tying Runeblades to auras a little bit more. They're already all produced auras, but I guess giving that faction identity of cards that reward you for having auras, and then giving Wizard a bit of this counterpunch capability to destroy auras, as well as the Runeblade Majestic that destroys auras if it hits. But Wizard seems to have both cards that can destroy auras and cards that can, prevent all the damage from rune chants, for example, things like that. So destroy X target aura tokens. It's cost X, it's a blue, which is great for Wizard. It blocks for 3, which is great. Destroy X target aura tokens and or auras with cost 0 controlled by target hero, then deal arcane damage to that hero equal to the number of auras destroyed this way. So importantly, this works against, rune chants. So it means that against Viserai, you can pitch your whole hand. So if you've got this and 3 other blues, you pay 9, destroy 9 rune chants, and deal them 9 arcane damage. Like, that's a fantastic turn in that matchup. Similarly against Chain, pitch a few, destroy a few Soul Shackles, and then have some other play is a great play. I mean, Soul Shackles you need to destroy even fewer, I think, than rune chants to have a real impact on Chain's game plan. If you can destroy 4 or 5 shackles on turn 4 or 5 and put them back to the start of the game and essentially reset their tempo, then you're giving yourself a lot more time and space to breathe as the Wizard player to keep chipping away and get the life totals low, keep those life totals close enough that you can go for your killing blow. And that's exactly what Wizard has struggled to do in a lot of these matchups. Both Chain and Viserai have a lot of inevitability and the capacity to put out a lot of damage in a turn in the late game. In Chain's case, put out some quite significant damage in the mid game that's going to probably widen the life total gap. And the ability now to lessen Chain's capacity to put out that damage in the mid game, slow them down in the late game, and for Viserai to slow down their game plan completely, gives Kano and the other Wizards a lot more capacity to actually fight, I think, in Classic Constructed against the Runeblade plans. So that's really, really exciting. You can also destroy Spectral Shields with this because they're aura tokens. And because the card text reads that you destroy the aura tokens and then deal arcane damage to the hero, the destruction of the Spectral Shields happens first, and then you can still deal the arcane damage, as far as I understand it at the moment. So Scour is a really exciting card because it just lets you interact with your opponent's board in a way that we haven't really seen before. And I think that's great design space to be exploring. Give it to a faction that's been, realistically very underrepresented in Classic Constructed. I know, Kano is very good in Blitz, but in terms of Classic Constructed, which is the #1 competitive format, giving Wizard a unique faction identity and a powerful, slice of the pie that lets it deal with onboard threats in a way that other factions can't, I think is a really, really cool design space to go into. So well done, LSS, on this one. Bingo is one that's become a little bit of a meme. It's a lot of fun. But I'm actually quite excited about this. Now, I know that Punisher cards that give your opponent a choice have historically not been as powerful in card games. But one of the things about Bingo is that the choice that your opponent has is quite limited. So they've only got a small number of cards in hand. They don't get to just choose between option A and option B, like a traditional Punisher card, like say Browbeat in Magic the Gathering, which is far less powerful than what it looks, because your opponent just gets to choose whether they take some damage or whether you draw some cards. They don't actually have to have resources available to inform the choice like they do with Bingo. So its base stats are really good. If you compare this to something like Flock of the Featherwalkers, which has been seen a lot of play in Chain, that's a 1 for 5 red attack, but it blocks for 2. So this blocks for 3. It's already a little bit better. In terms of the effect, you haven't got the restrictive casting cost that you do have for Flock of the Featherwalkers, where you have to reveal another card from your hand. So it's a little more flexible in terms of being able to be played. Where the downside is that it doesn't create this sort of quicken token, so it give you that ongoing effect to prolong your turn. but this has the potential to either have go again or draw a card, both of which allow you to prolong your turn themselves. So the downside, I guess, of this card is you don't know what's going to be happening, whether you're getting go again or drawing a card, until after it hits. That means you can't Snapdragon Scalers it without risking wasting your Snapdragons, because it might get go again anyway. And you can't do things like attack reactions or other things, before the damage is dealt, without again risking wasting the card's effect if you do in fact gain go again. But this synergizes really, really well with Spellbound Creepers, because that effect is an instant. You can wait until your bingo's effect has resolved before you make the decision about whether you want to use Spellbound Creepers to regain your action point, if you need to, or whether bingo is going to get go again and you can just continue your turn. And if bingo hits a non-attack action and you draw a card, then that can help you to prolong your turn with your creepers as well. So I think this has some capacity both as a reasonably efficient finisher on some of those turns in chain. You're often happy to just finish with a 1 for 5, and if you happen to draw a card or it happens to get go again, then maybe you can get some extra value out of it, but you're not too fussed either way, whether you get either or none of the abilities. But on those turns where you really want to get one of these abilities off, it doesn't have a restrictive play cost. It blocks really well as well if you need it to. But you can wait until it hits and then think about using your creepers to get around the uncertainty of which benefit you're going to get. Obviously, if your opponent has a lot of defense reactions in their deck, bingo becomes a lot less strong. But I can see it playing a role in some of those sort of mid-range decks as a just really efficient, well-costed value card. And Spellbound Creepers, particularly in Runeblade, helping you get around some of the downsides of having to wait to find out which benefit you get, if either. Number 6 is a bit of a cheat. This is 2 cards, but these are 2 really interesting cards for Azalea, and I think for Lexi as well, in Tri-Shot and Rain Razors. They're the next iterations, I think, of Poison the Tips and Rapid Fire, which we've seen have sort of limited success, because giving all your arrows go again and giving all your arrows an on-hit effect doesn't necessarily let you actually hit with many arrows or attack with many arrows in the turn. But what Tri-Shot and Rain Razors do is they help you to be able to shoot more arrows in the turn, because, of course, with Death Dealer, one of the restrictions is you can only use it once per turn. So something like Rapid Fire doesn't necessarily help you. I mean, it gets another arrow in because it has reload, as does Poison the Tips, but you don't get the benefit of using your bow, i.e. Replacing the card, replacing the attack and getting the draw. Whereas with something like Tri-Shot, if you start your turn with Tri-Shot, you can actually use Death Dealer 3 times in that turn, which when you combine it with 3 of a kind, all of a sudden you don't need to be worrying about this awkward sequencing where when do you play your reload card? What if you draw your reload card off your 3 of a kind? Oh, that's really awkward. Instead, you can just wait with your Tri-Shot, play it, play 3 of a kind, and then you can use your Death Dealer 3 times to get 3 attacks off, and you don't even have to worry about that as long as you draw some arrows. Similarly, Rain Razors, it helps those big turns when you're trying to get damage in and get your really important on-hit triggers off. It buffs your whole turn. So when you combine these 2 cards, if you do happen to be able to get them, and I know that's a lot to ask, to have a Tri-Shot and a Rain Razors and then maybe a 3 of a kind as well to make sure you've got enough arrows to utilize them on that one turn. But if you are able to string those things together, you've got a really powerful turn with all your arrows buffed, being able to activate your bow again and again and again. And if you aren't using Death Dealer but you're using Voltaire, then even one of these 2 cards is really strong, I think. Being able to, on a 3 of a kind turn, have Tri-Shot, which lets you then be Voltairing 4 times, all your arrows have go again from Voltaire, and your last one's stronger. That's a really powerful turn, and it might help Lexi, and particularly Ice Lexi, to just get that little bit of an edge that it's been missing in terms of those big turns to maintain the tempo that it needs. Rain Razors, similarly, can give you, on those bigger turns, just better access to your on-hit triggers, which might just get 1 or 2 extra cards out of their hand. And again, let you maintain the cards in hand that you need as Ranger, which is a very card-hungry faction, to keep up the tempo. Because once you get on the back foot, as we know with Lexi or with Azalea, it's really, really hard to even be doing anything on your turn. And Tri-Shot and Rain Razors don't necessarily help with that, because once you're getting behind, Tri-Shot blocks for 3, that's nice as a non-attack action. Rain Razors doesn't block, but neither of them let you have really impactful turns off a small number of cards. But what they do is they let your bigger turns be even bigger. And I think they have the capacity to probably help a little bit there. That being said, obviously, one of the inconsistencies of that Ranger game plan has always been, as I mentioned, that you need to kind of get all these things together and it all needs to fall into place, and that creates consistency issues as to whether across the course of a large tournament in a competitive space you're going to be able to do that. But I think Tri-Shot and Rain Razors have a shot, pardon the pun, at helping to plug some of those holes, and with a bit of tuning, bit of testing, and some careful deck building, I think they can play a role. Sigil of Parapets is number 5, and this is, I think, one that slid under a lot of people's radar, but it is a really important card that gives Wizard a new capability that it really hasn't had. I know I mentioned earlier that giving Wizard the ability to destroy auras is a really nice piece of the pie to give them, particularly destroying mass numbers of auras off one single card. But what Sigil of Parapets does is it lets Wizard maintain tempo in a way that it just hasn't been able to. You've kind of had this binary feel when you're playing a Wizard deck where you're playing your defense reactions and trying to get value off your 0 for 4s, which are already kind of a bit dicey to include in a Kano deck because they're misses off the top. And they're red, so you can't Kano with them. So, you're playing FaB for Scenes and you're playing Sink Belows or whatever else, and you're kind of like, oh, it's good. It's okay if I draw it, but I still can't. If I want to be aggressive, then I can't. I just have to kind of sit there and block. And they don't really help you to be very efficient in stopping a big attack. Like the 0 for 4s are fine, but if your opponent comes at you with a lot, then you're only kind of blocking 4 and then just adding 3 blocks on top of that. Whereas what Sigil of Parapets does is it lets you go, I can still make plays on the turn when I'm going to be blocking, and I can still block big. So you can, for instance, pay 1 to the Sigil of Parapets, and then you can consider the other, say you're pitching a blue, assuming you're pitching a blue, the other 2 resources that you've got off that blue pitch that you've used to pay for the Sigil of Parapets can be your resources that you're using to hopefully play the cards off the top this turn. Then you've got 2 other cards in hand. Hopefully they're blues too. You can pitch both of those to Kano twice, and hopefully hit 2 cards that you can play off the top using the 2 resources you've got floating. And then all of a sudden you're making 2 plays. It could be, a Scalding Rain into a Zap even, or a Scalding Rain into a Chain Lightning, or a Chain Lightning into a Reverberate from Arsenal, like whatever. But all of a sudden your Sigil of Parapets is defending for 6. So instead of playing these 0 for 4s, which are reds, so they can't even pay for Kano, you've got a blue defense reaction here that is potentially defending for more than what those 0 for 4s were. And that means that you're both making plays at instant speed on your opponent's turn using Kano's ability, getting a bit of damage in, but also blocking for more, hopefully blocking for 6 or even blocking for 8 potentially. If you've got something like a Reverberate in Arsenal or a Gaze the Ages that goes off or something like that. So I think Sigil of Parapets has a lot of capacity and a lot of promise in terms of helping Kano to maintain a bit of tempo, still get the damage chips in, and just improve its ability to keep that life total gap low, which is really the aim of Wizard in the mid-game. The next one, getting to number 4, almost at the top 3, is Helm of Sharp Eye. So this is the first warrior head equipment that we've seen, which is really exciting, because as we know, when we're putting together a Bolton deck or a Dorinthia deck, the head slot is kind of like a bit of an afterthought. You can play Hope Merchant's Hood to get a mulligan at some point in the game, like that's fine, but you're not really getting heaps of value out of your head slot compared to what a lot of other decks are, and you'll often just play a Skull Cap. Helm of Sharp Eye gives the faction just that little bit of an edge in terms of card advantage on a key turn, which a lot of other factions can get from their headpiece. And so you're looking at an attack reaction, great for warrior, at cost 1, which is not ideal, but you will sometimes in both Bolton and Dorinthia have the capacity to have an extra resource on your key turns. Destroy Helm of Sharp Eye, banish the top card of your deck. You may play at this combat chain. Activate this ability only if you control a weapon with strength greater than twice its base strength. So I think there's been a clarification. There was some conjecture amongst the rules team from LSS about whether a weapon that's buffed, for instance, by an Iron Song response, if you Iron Song response your Dawnblade and it's all of a sudden got 6 strength, does the weapon itself have greater than twice its base strength, or does Iron Song response merely buff the weapon attack? I think the resolution to that, and let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think the resolution to that has been that the weapon itself is considered to have twice its base strength if you Iron Song response your Dawnblade to 6. So therefore you can use the Helm of Sharp Eye in those circumstances. And if that's the case, then I think Helm of Sharp Eye can absolutely play a role in extending those Dorinthia turns and in helping you to get over the top of a block on a key turn. Because as we know, Dorinthia's kind of got some key breakpoints. There's 3 off 0 resources is the usual breakpoint. But then sometimes if they've got at least 1 resource, that's 4 because they could Singing Steelblade for an Iron Song response. And then once they're up to having maybe 3 resources available, you've of course got Overpower, and then you've got Rout at 2 resources too. So there's kind of those different breakpoints that your opponent can block around. But once you introduce Helm of Sharp Eye, which can use a resource to access a whole additional card, it kind of becomes like Singing Steelblade in a way, but can potentially chain into even more. So if there's a Singing Steelblade on top, you can pay 1 resource to Helm of Sharp Eye, banish top card of your deck, and if it's a Singing Steelblade, pay 1 more to Singing Steelblade, grab something else. So it can chain into quite a bit extra and perhaps help you get over the top of some of those breakpoints in terms of your opponent's blocking to help your Dawnblade hit on a key turn. But for Boltyn, particularly if you're playing Raiden, you've got the capacity basically to use this on any turn when your Raiden is active, because it's going to be buffed to 3, which is more than double 0, or more than twice 0, which is its base strength. So this in Boltyn, basically any card in your deck is really useful to have on a combat chain in Boltyn, because as long as you've got a card in Soul and you can be giving whatever you're attacking with Go Again, you getting additional card is what you struggle with the most. You know, Boltyn is action point rich, but card poor. So getting an additional card in Boltyn is basically the most important resource that Boltyn can get. And this can, I think, help Boltyn decks to just get that little bit of a power boost that might help them be one of the aggro decks that has a bit of a role to play in the coming metagame. Obviously, the loss of Plunder Run hurts all aggro decks. It hurts Boltyn as well, particularly being a card poor deck. But Helm of Sharp Eye might help to offset that a bit. And since everybody's lost Plunder Run, Boltyn might actually end up being in a reasonable position. So I'm excited to see how this card performs. Swarming Gloomveil and Runic Reclamation are the 2 Runeblade Majestics, and I kind of want to talk about them together because they have some really interesting roles in each of the Runeblade decks. Swarming Gloomveil will work really well in Chain and Briar. Briar's all about 0 for 4s. Swarming Gloomveil triggers off creating auras, so any embodiments, fantastic. You know, you're off to the races. Sting of Sorcery, another aura, off to the races. So as soon as you played 1 aura, it gains Go Again. If you've played and or created 2 or more auras, it gains +1 strength as well. So then it becomes a 0 for 4 with Go Again. And once you've played or created 3 or more auras, it gains when this hits a hero, they can't prevent arcane damage from sources you control this turn, which is really cool little bonus, right? That helps. They all of a sudden can't prevent your Rosetta arcane damage. Great. If this hits. So how can you create these auras? I mean, you've got Embodiment of Lightning. You've got to play 2 non-attack actions. You've got Sting of Sorcery. You've got Embodiment of Earth. You can only create 1 now. But if you play Sting of Sorcery, then play this, and the arcane damage hits, then you've created an Embodiment of Earth. You've all of a sudden created 2 auras this turn, and this gains +1. If you've played a Sting of Sorcery and any other non-attack action, then you've played Sting of Sorcery, that's 1 aura. The other non-attack action creates Embodiment of Lightning, that's the 2nd aura. And then this attack will, if the arcane hits, create the 3rd aura in the Embodiment of Earth, and all of a sudden you've got this on-hit trigger as well. So I can see Swarming Gloomveil just being fantastic in Briar. Perhaps as even a replacement for Ravenous Rabble since it blocks for 3, but perhaps a replacement for the Arcanic Shockwaves and some of the other attacks that blocked for 3 but didn't always have Go Again. It's also got a great role to play in Viserai and Chain. In Viserai, it's a great one to be playing on your combo turn because you are going to be creating rune chants on your combo turn. This is going to be becoming a go again attack that has very good strength to cost ratio and has a really important on hit trigger as well. Obviously, most of your, on your combo turn, your big bulk of your rune chants will have popped by the time this attack hits, even if it's your first attack. So you're not going to be gaining much in terms of stopping them preventing those rune chants, but it can help to make the future rune chants on the turn be unpreventable, which is a big threat and makes this a must block. In Chain, you're creating auras from your Soul Shackle every turn. So any additional auras you can create from rune chants or anything else will help you to get to the 2 and 3 that are required for this. So this can be a role player absolutely in any of the 3 Runeblade decks at the moment in Classic Constructed, and I think it's going to be a really powerful card that you're going to see around a lot. Runic Reclamation, I'm just like, I've spent the last month testing against Channel Mount Heroic and trying to get around it and trying to beat it consistently. And this feels like a game changer. This feels like Channel Mount Heroic Briar already lost, the embodiment debuff, Ball Lightning, and Plunder Run. And now all the other Runeblade decks, Chain particularly, I think, can threaten to kill your Channel Mount Heroic with an on-hit trigger very easily at any point in the game that they draw this if you plop down your Channel Mount Heroic. So I think this will improve Chain's matchup against any Channel Mount Heroic deck significantly. And I'll just be chucking this in the sideboard of Chain for that reason. It does cost 3. It doesn't have Go Again, but of course Chain can give this Go Again. And this is something that's kind of been missing for Chain really, actually, in general. It might even make the main deck because there aren't that many really chunky attacks. Like as a 7, this is pretty good. You do have quite a lot of blues. And being able to pitch for 3, play this, make a Soul Shackle, play this, you've got a 7 power Go Again, usually with a relevant on hit trigger against a lot of different heroes. And then you can continue your turn. And being able to condense that much power into one card, I think is going to make this quite a player for Chain who can give this Go Again every single time. So number 2, into the top 2. This is a cycle of cards. I haven't got them all here. I've got 2 and then a third in a moment to talk about. But these are the 0-cost Illusionist Spectra Auras. I am super excited about these cards. I think people have been a little bit... I don't know whether people have been underwhelmed by them. I think people are a little bit excited about them. But I think they have the capacity to be very powerful. People underestimated the Spectra Auras last time around, and they cost 4. I mean, I know they're yellows and they synergized with Luminaris, but these ones cost 0. So on their own, you can just play them out at the end of your chain. If you're playing a Luminaris deck, yes, you can't pitch them and have them be relevant for your Luminaris, but you always do want some amount of blues in those decks. And what these allow you to do is pitch a yellow, play a Herald, maybe a second one with Go Again, and then play out this at the end of your turn. And if you do have a spare resource and you get 2 for 1, so you play out a Phantasm, so you pitch a yellow, play a Wartune Herald, they block with a 6 power, your Wartune Herald pops. Sometimes you're in the position where even if you footsteps and get back your action point, you can't really make another relevant play. But what these do is they give you the capacity to always have another relevant play off one card at the end of all those turns. One card, no resources required, and you get to pop down a Spectra, which is really taxing for them to get rid of, which gives you a very relevant effect. So Pierce Reality gives the first Illusionist attack action card you play each turn +2. That's very powerful. If they don't deal with that, you're getting a lot of value off it over the course of the game. And in combination, these just synergize so well together. Passing Mirage says your first illusionist attack each turn loses and can't gain Phantasm. So all of a sudden, from a couple of plays that cost 0, at the end of turns where you've already made attacks and had Go Again from Luminaris, you've all of a sudden stacked up effects that say, my first attack action card gains +2 each turn, and my first illusionist attack loses and can't gain Phantasm. So my attacks are more powerful, and they lose their biggest drawback. So if your opponent's not dealing with these as you play them out, which is not really very easy for them to do, they have to play, dedicated cards usually, most decks, to gain additional attack actions to be able to deal with Spectra. And the minimal investment required in playing these compared to how difficult they are to get rid of, I think means that they can be extremely powerful role players in these Prism decks. So I'm excited to test out Prism with these, particularly a Luminaris build, and see where we can get to. They also block for 2. I know I mentioned that earlier, but the fact that they block compared to the yellow Monarch auras, I think is really, really important. Shimmers of Silver is the majestic one. I want to mention it. It tends in a slightly different direction because it buffs your auras. So when you attack with your Spectral Shields, for example, you put a +1/+1 counter on them. But it also buffs your other Spectra auras that are there. So it can place counters on itself. It can place counters on your other Spectras that you've played. And just, I guess, adds to the power of this package because, the others... buff your illusions attack action cards, whereas this is also buffing your aura attacks. So it means that if your opponent ignores your Spectras, but tries to put a bit of pressure on to deny you cards in hand, you can still be getting reasonable attacks back in the other way, even with 0 cards in hand if they're ignoring your Spectras. Shimmers of Silver means that your aura attacks are going to be gaining strength every turn. So you can be making profitable trades where you're blocking with your whole hand and still getting free, reasonably strong attacks in on your turn. So number 1 is Bravo Star of the Show. So, I mean, this may be a little bit predictable since, it's the star of the show after all, but also everybody's talking about the card. But, it'd be remiss of me to have a top 10 list, I think, for Everfest that doesn't have Bravo there at number 1. It's a really exciting hero card. It's a beloved hero with a wonderful card pool, including some specializations, which everybody who sat down to build an Oldhim deck, I think, when Tales of Aria came out, was thinking, oh yeah, Crippling Crush. Oh no, I can't play Crippling Crush. It's a specialization. All of a sudden, you've got another version of Bravo, which means you can play Crippling Crush, you can play Showtime, and it's got Essence of Earth, Ice and Lightning, which means you get all those fantastic elemental cards and Ice and Lightning and Earth cards from Aria. And unlike Oldhim, you actually get the Lightning cards too, which lets you potentially look at a really more aggressive Guardian build. And I think a lot of people who are building Bravo in the last little while, shout out to Isaac, good friend who's been on the channel quite a few times, who's talked about his journey with FaB. He has tended towards this more aggressive Bravo build, even with Bravo Showstopper, that's trying to have multiple attacks per turn, put pressure on, and really utilize those crush attacks and pummels to put pressure on and keep some tempo. And I think Bravo Star of the Show, with all those existing tools plus access to the Lightning card pool, can deal more effectively with Prism and those Spectra auras that I mentioned earlier, but also have more options for Go Again and smaller attacks that have Go Again to supplement the Guardian card pool and those big Guardian crush attacks. The ability itself, yes, it's hard to trigger. Yes, it might not happen that many times, but it gets around one of the major drawbacks of the multi-fuse cards, which tended not to be as powerful in Aria. And that is that it triggers at the start of your turn. You don't have to have paid resources, and you don't have to have spent any cards before this ability triggers. It's not a card that has Ice, Lightning, and Earth fusion, which demands a card from your hand plus whatever resources to pay for it. It's simply an ability on your hero card. So if you happen to have a double element card, say an Earth Ice card, the Pulse, and then any other Lightning card in your hand, whether you need to pitch them for resources or whether you need to play them, you can still reveal them to Bravo's ability at the start of your turn and give this fantastic benefit. The next attack action card with cost 3 or greater you play this turn gains +2 strength, dominate, and Go Again. So I'm really excited to see how Bravo plays out. I'm excited to see, people triggering their Bravo ability and going, yeah, I got it all, and here's my massive turn. I think that's going to be really fun. There are so many different deck building options because of the triple essence that Bravo has. And I think it really just helps us to bring together everything that we've seen from Aria, call back to Welcome to Wraith and all those original Bravo and Guardian decks and attacks and cards, and give us a great way to launch into the future of FaB. So, well done, LSS. I think Bravo's a fantastic card, a great design. Might be too good, we'll wait and see. But for now, I'm just really excited about it. So I hope you've all enjoyed. That's my top 10 list for Everfest, as well as a very quick Nationals recap there at the start. I can't wait to dive into Everfest. I'm going to get cracking hopefully in the next day or so on some deck building and some pack cracking. And I'll be back with more videos about decks and the new meta and the ProQuest season coming up very soon. But hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.